Messiah was a personal expression of faith. Composed in just 24 days, it combined his love of church music with his passion for opera, celebrating Jesus' significance for all humanity with a text drawn from the Bible and, crucially, in English.
And this was the turning point. This was when, for me, Handel ceased to be an illustrious composer from abroad, but became one of us.
He'd discovered the ideal vehicle for his musical ambitions. Messiah is an oratorio, a kind of narrative concert previously unknown in the UK. Dramatic text could be played out in non-theatrical space, with no expensive scenery or costumes, all bound together by thrilling choruses that could be sung by pretty much every man.
Through these collective experiences, Handel started a very British choral revolution. It's thanks to him that even today there are probably more choral societies per square inch in our country than in most others. We British love to sing. Handel saw it and harnessed it.
The Hallelujah chorus is the centrepiece of the oratorio. When George II first heard it, he spontaneously got to his feet. Because the king had stood up, everyone else had to stand. Audience and musicians. Messiah is without doubt Handel's masterpiece, a massive artistic success, but also just the popular success his career needed. And it was the Hallelujah chorus that really seized the public imagination. With a little bit of rehearsal, anybody can be a part of it. And here in a school hall in Somerset, I've brought the pupils together with singers from half a dozen local choral societies for a Hallelujah chorus crash course.
OK. We're going to start soft and we're going to do a slow, fantastic build for 8 Hallelujahs. Here's a chord. Big, big breath like you're going to yawn. 3, 4. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Good. I want to feel real power on. Ha! Ready, go! Ha! 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 Good. That is the power that we need every time you sing the word hallelujah.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. The secret of the Hallelujah chorus's success is its blood-pulsing rhythm. In 3.5 minutes, there are over 70 hallelujahs, an unstoppable, jubilant repetition.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. You've got to attack it. 2, 3, go!
Like King George, you have to respond.
Again.
And respond to it physically.
Hallelujah! 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 Right, this is getting very good indeed. You may think I'm trying to get you to sing in the equivalent of kind of death metal. And you wouldn't be far wrong.
I believe that the act of singing, no matter what it is good for you. But Handel intended that singing Hallelujah would be good for your body and for your soul. Soon after Messiah's first performance, a friend congratulated Handel on the success of his noble entertainment. His reply was that he'd be sorry if he'd only entertained his audience. I wished, he declared, to make them better.
I buy that. I buy that. We have power We have pizzazz. 2, 3, 4.
After less than an hour, there's an audible improvement. It's almost impossible to sing this piece of music with a reserved and reverent attitude. It's as if Handel wrote a sense of instant community into his score.
It sounded so great. They just all started singing. It was such a big kind of volume. It was amazing.
It was really passionate and it just felt really good to be part of it.
The energy builds and you feed on each other's energy and it really gives you a bit of extra lift.
It was quite cool to be a part of it, and it was good to sing as well.
The young treblers today are 11, the same age as I was when I first sang the Christmas music for the Messiah, which was in 1944.
It sounded awesome. I loved the sound.
Very good. Give yourselves a round of applause.
Not long before his 50th birthday, Handel was invited here to Oxford University to become the first ever recipient of an honorary degree in music. And this exceptional gesture from the heart of the British establishment was testimony not just to his status as a composer, but to his huge impact on the musical and cultural life of the nation. To mark the occasion, he organised a series of concerts here at the Sheldonian Theatre. But what did this academic distinction really mean to Handel? In fact, he seems to have been so busy organising, performing and collecting his substantial box office receipts that he never actually got around to picking up his degree.
The oratorio form gave Handel the freedom to organise his concerts with supreme flexibility and flair. Even a three-movement harp concerto could be inserted comfortably into the texture of arias and choruses. All of Handel's problems were solved. Oratorio concerts were cheap to stage, audiences found them both respectable and uplifting, and he could experiment freely. However, when he presented as an oratorio the secular, even saucy story of Semele, he was to discover that perhaps the form did have its limitations.
It's about telling a story, and Handel does that through his music. But we as performers, we have to take this music and do it through our bodies. He wrote so well in the English language. I mean, you can sing it in a very upright and a very sort of pristine way, and you can sing it in a very sensual way. It's a gavotte, so it's always sort of moving over to the downbeat, always. And so this endless pleasure and this love Semele enjoys above. And, you know, the music just is a continual joy.
Handel's audience was confused. The stories and oratorios were meant to be upright, at least biblical, and yet Semele is drawn from the classical and slightly erotic Ovid's Metamorphoses. Semele was, they suspected, something slightly louche, an opera in disguise. Overall, it was a failure, and I think for Handel, a hurtful failure, but it did yield one rich tenor aria, which was and continues to be hugely popular. It's an interesting example of the fact that Handel so often tried and didn't always necessarily succeed. This is a bit of a flop when it opened.
Yeah, but I think it's gone on sort of from strength to strength, and some of the things that we love most of Handel's are from this. So in the long run, he won out.
You do feel that he did end up British, didn't you? Because the way he sets the English language is so extraordinarily good.
Yes, and I mean, I think he always spoke with a sort of German accent, but he'd adopted Englishness in the most extraordinary way, and I mean, he became this amazing symbol of Britishness. He was almost like a sort of, in the cultural sphere, the equivalent of the king. I mean, the king was German, top cultural figure was German.
Handel's best tunes always reach out to the widest possible audience. Spring Gardens on the south bank of the Thames was once part of Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens, a vast and hugely popular 18th century entertainment complex dominated by a statue of the hero of British culture, George Frideric Handel.
The people themselves were part of the entertainment. They saw themselves as part of this unfolding, constantly moving spectacle. Some were not pleased with the way in which aristocratic and poor would mingle together. They said that they were jumbled together as in a common grave, which is a rather dismal view of the gardens. But I think most people who came here would come to look at the statues, to enjoy walking in the trees, this sort of ambience of nature in what was becoming increasingly built-up, urbanised London. They would sit and have dinner, and they would listen to music by Handel performed in front of the dinner boxes.
Handel was a master of the grand musical statement, and modern audiences are still captivated by his bold, large-scale pieces, like the music for the Royal Fireworks, which was first heard at a legendary public rehearsal in Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens.
Public rehearsal of Handel's firework music made an enormous impact. There were huge numbers. London Bridge was the only route across the river, and so it was jam-packed with coaches and carriages, and apparently a group of footmen had a public brawl and some nobleman got injured.
And how many people do you actually think crammed in here to witness this spectacle?
About 12,000. I think he always had his eye on popular success of a kind, where he could do it without compromising his musical or artistic integrity.
Handel was nearly 65 and still composing prolifically, but now he began to use his status as the country's leading composer to support charitable causes. The Foundling Hospital was Britain's first home for abandoned and illegitimate babies. William Hogarth was already a major benefactor, and Handel now decided to join him.
God, looking at that, as with all Hogarth, you just sense just how seething and basically most people's experience of life was so unpleasant.
As you see all sides of 18th century life. The March of the Guards. He raffled it to raise money for the hospital, and he gave the spare tickets to the hospital. There was a few that were unsold, and one of those happened, perhaps not by chance, to be the winning ticket, so the hospital got the painting as well as the proceeds of the raffle.
How did Handel come to be involved?
He first turned up in the council committee minutes offering to do a benefit concert in 1749, and the concert was arranged within about 3 weeks, and he wrote some new music for it, the Foundling Hospital Anthem, and put it together with the other new music that he'd written that year to make a very popular, sold-out concert.
So this is clearly a way that you can make a difference. When obviously Hogarth could auction paintings and so on, Handel had to do gigs.
Yes, very much in the Live Aid theme of today. He did the benefit concerts of the 18th century.
Blessed, blessed, blessed are they. Blessed Blessed, blessed are they that considereth the poor and the needy. The Lord will deliver them in time of trouble.
The anthem that Handel composed specially to be performed at his Foundling Hospital benefit concerts brilliantly demonstrates his ability to combine sincere spirituality with rigorous practicality. It's basically a recruiting song for the charity, but it works by inviting the listener into a sort of feel-good experience about charitable giving.
This is Handel's last will and testament. He wrote a will in 1750, and he leaves a bequest of the score and parts of Messiah to the Foundling Hospital, which enabled them to carry on their charity concerts after his death.
Seeing Handel's will really fascinated me. His handwriting was as bold, clear and forceful as I imagine the man himself was. I was keen to see some more, particularly some of his actual music manuscripts. And in the British Library they've conserved one of the most poignant, the manuscript for Jephthah, his last great oratorio.
What happens is that in 1751-2 his eyesight starts to fail. This is Handel's, as it were, typical handwriting. Very few changes, and those that are made very, very clearly. He may leave some things, details of the orchestra to fill in later, but pretty well by the time we're through, there's a draft of something for every movement. And when he gets to the bottom of this page, you see the 13th February 1751. His annotation there is he couldn't go on because of the trouble with his eyesight, and he couldn't do any more. Now, this was doubly troublesome because not merely had he not finished the score, but the first night was only 10 days away. So he has to get something ready for there. And actually what we then find, down at the bottom of the next page, he says 10 days later, his eye is somewhat recovered and he can go back to work. The really curious thing is, of course, that the trouble with his eyesight happens on the chorus. How dark, O Lord, are thy decrees. The thing about it is 23rd of February actually was his birthday.
It's suddenly become rather painfully autobiographical.
Certainly so. There's a sense of fate about this.
His creative life was over. It wasn't long before he'd lost the sight in both eyes. For the next few years, he struggled on, helped by assistants, revising old works and tirelessly promoting the performance of his music.
Every time you get to know the music of a great composer, your exploration throws up lots of questions about who that person might be or might have been, because somehow the music will always feel autobiographical. Handel came to Britain and, as people so often claim, ended up becoming more British than the British. But for him personally, it must have always felt unusual to have made his whole world in a country where he would only ever be perceived as a foreigner. So he must have been a pretty strong individual, able to take the knocks, that he could more or less completely reinvent himself. He knew what he wanted and he was damn sure he was going to get it. All great people who've achieved anything in any walk of life have had to be quite ruthless. But I find that a conundrum because his music is so deeply human and so potent and so theatrical, so come hither, so unput-downable, And yet it seems to me the man behind the music must have been incredibly tough, which probably didn't make him very likeable. But goodness me, the legacy is worth volumes. One night, on returning from a performance of Messias at Covent Garden, Handel was seized with a sudden weakness, and he retired to his bed, never to rise again. On the 14th of April 1759, he passed away peacefully at the age of 74. Over 3,000 mourners attended his funeral, which was given full state honours. After his death, his reputation would continue to grow, and the engine was Messias.
In the years following Handel's death, Great Britain grew increasingly rich and powerful, and Handel's music became part of the very fabric of our national life. In the next episode of The Birth of British Music, I'll discover how, at the end of the 18th century, another foreigner, the Austrian Joseph Haydn, became our musical national hero.
And The Birth of British Music continues here on BBC HD next Saturday at the slightly earlier time of 7:05. Next tonight, more music, and we're off to the proms.